Chaitanyamayi Satyamayi Parame Anandamayi Chaitanyamayi Satyamayi Parame Anandamayi Chaitanyamayi Satyamayi Parame Satyamayi Parame Satyamayi Parame Satyam Jnanam Satyam Jnanam Jyotir Aravinda Satyam Jnanam Satyam Jnanam Jyotir Aravinda Satyam Jnanam Satyam Jnanam Jyotir Aravinda Jyotir Aravinda Jyotir Aravinda. So, we begin with this, there's a famous poem of Sri Aurobindo called One Day, which ends with that line, one step and all is sky and God. We've all heard it, right? So, the title I've punned on this, I've said 3 steps and all is sky and God, because Sri Aurobindo gives us wonderful 3 steps in his objects of yoga to reach the state where all is sky and God. So let's briefly look at the poem. One day and all the half deed is done. One day and all the unborn begun. A little path and the great goal, a touch that brings the divine whole. Hill after hill was climbed and now, behold, the last tremendous brow and the great rock that none has trod. A step and all is sky and God. It's a beautiful, beautiful poem. So the 3 steps and all is sky and God. Step 1. Sri Aurobindo actually gives us 3 steps. So the first step, he says, the first step of yoga is to make the sankalp of Atma Samarpan. Samarpan is surrender, Atma is of the self. Put yourself with all your heart and all your strength into God's hands. Make no conditions, ask for nothing, not even for siddhi in yoga, for nothing at all, except that in you and through you, His will may be directly performed. This is easy to understand, but very, very difficult to implement, because there's not one thing in our life that we really do without wanting something from it, right? We do everything because we want something from it. Even when we meditate, we want to feel peace, we want to feel mother, we want some kickback for everything we do. But Sri Aurobindo says that at the beginning of any doing, just address the divine and say, make me an instrument of your will. Let your will be done through me. I want nothing. Now, in the beginning, it won't be true because you do want something. But if you keep articulating it with aspiration, with a desire that this is so, over a period of time, you'll find small windows where actually you're doing, but you're not invested in the outcome. And when can you be not invested in the outcome? When you're already getting something other than the outcome. So if you're already connected to the mother while doing, and that is such a rich feeling, then you just want to give yourself to the mother and say, I'm giving myself to you. You do whatever you want, let your will be done through me. I want nothing. I'm not attached to any outcome. And really this gives you a glimpse of great freedom. Normally, even in a simple thing like talking, you want the outcome that the person should understand you, you should look good in the person's eyes, whatever. But instead of all that, if you're connected to that, and if you're really reaching out for that with self-giving, giving yourself to that, and saying through this conversation also, let your will be done. I want nothing. Even if that will is that the person gets annoyed at me, there's conflict, whatever, I don't take it as an interaction between her and me. It's your will. You've brought me to it, you'll take me through it. I'm going to connect with you and let your will flow through me, and I want nothing. So it's a very, very beautiful practice. If we can do it even 1% of the day, to think that we are doing it all the time, unless we are exceptional, we are fooling ourselves. So, Sri Aurobindo further says, to those who demand from him, God gives what they demand. But to those who give themselves and demand nothing, he gives everything that they might otherwise have asked or needed. In addition, he gives himself and the spontaneous boons of his love. At first, it may not be apparent how this ideal of active self-mastery can be reconciled. This is from A.S. Dalal's composition, Freedom and Mastery, Sri Aurobindo's words. At first, it may not be apparent how this ideal of active self-mastery can be reconciled with the apparently opposite ideal of self-surrender and of becoming the assenting instrument of the divine Shakti. So, A.S. Dalal quotes Sri Aurobindo saying that real self-mastery comes from self-surrender, and you feel they are opposite, right? If you're surrendering, how are you the master? But you're the master because the master of the universe becomes your slave. Sri Aurobindo has written it so beautifully. He who's the master of universes is a slave to love. If you have that surrender and love for the divine, then firstly you're freed from the attraction and recoil of your preferences, isn't it? Because you're accepting everything as his will. Then any outcome, and you're not slave to the outcome. Otherwise, we are always slave to outcomes. No, this outcome is good, I'm happy. That outcome is bad, I'm unhappy. But if you're in a state of surrender, whatever comes, you're good. So that's the real freedom.
Would this also apply when you know that at that point of time it's your lower nature acting, in the sense that you are making an effort, but it's a reaction, or
Yeah, so there are many steps on the way. On the way, of course, the lower nature will react, But it's good to surrender that also to the mother. And what we did last time, to just soften and relax behind it, not be controlled by it. Okay? So, further, mother's words. This is what's remarkable, that when one is perfectly surrendered to the divine, one is perfectly free. So Sri Aurobindo's line in Savitri, forever love, O beautiful slave of God. So he's telling Savitri that you're so surrendered to me that forever love, O beautiful slave of God. He who hunts and seizes me, my captive becomes. There's another line in Savitri. He who hunts and seizes me, my captive becomes. And in becoming my captive is the real freedom. Because then I'm not hunted by my choice of I want, I don't want. I'm free because whatever it comes to me, God is giving. And this is the absolute condition for freedom, to belong to the divine alone. You are free from the whole world because you belong only to Him. So Mother says the world will trouble you in proportion to how much you belong to the world. If you belong only to the divine, the world can't trouble you. But what does it mean to belong only to the divine? What does that mean? In a sense, we all belong to the divine. We all are the divine. But what does it mean to consciously belong to the divine?
Active remembrance. Keep remembering and try to be in connection with that divinity.
Right.
It's like, for us, the divine is sometimes more a notion and less a reality.
Yes. So to constantly feel Mother's presence and to be so complete and peaceful in that presence, that I'm not very bothered. See, why am I so attached to the world? Because I'm invested in it. I think my happiness depends on how much the world comes to me, how much it withdraws. But if I'm getting all my happiness from connecting with the mother, then whatever is happening outside, I keep giving you that example, in when you have your first crush, you're so obsessed with the thoughts of that person that what others do to you doesn't affect you so much, because you're getting all your happiness. That's of course unhealthy, because sooner or later you'll come crashing down. No, I'm not saying be in relationships, but don't make one person the center of your existence. It'll always give you pain. But instead of that person, if you have the divine, the mother like that, and you're constantly feeling her, communicating with her, receiving her guidance, doing her will, to that extent you're not really bothered. I'm not so invested what she thinks of me, he says to me, because I'm getting all my joy from that connection.
Also surrender, right? Even if I'm always surrendered to the divine, then I'm all the time, I belong to the divine, I mean nothing else matters.
Yes, yes.
Surrender is, I think, the other side of the same coin of what Max said.
Remembrance. But you can surrender to something concrete, not a figment in the air. So to really live this surrender, it's necessary to cultivate a practice by which Mother's a very living presence. Like I was speaking to this person who follows the Gyan Marg, and he asked me, finally, don't you agree that picture of the mother is a symbol? So I said, it is a symbol. All pictures are a symbol. So then he asked me, then what gives you your motivation to live? So I said, well, my motivation to live is to connect with the mother. So he caught me, but she's a symbol. So I said, I'm not talking about connecting with the picture. The picture is an entry point to feel a very living presence in you. And when you feel that living presence, it evokes a surrender. It cannot be done at a very mental level, though Smaran helps. But it's important. Mother says, give me half an hour a day. Spend time with me for even half an hour a day. Rest of the day I'll carry you. So in whatever way, make half an hour a day to connect with her, so that her presence starts living in you and carries you through the rest of the day. So Mother writes so beautifully. She writes that one way is to feel burdened and to just carry the load of the day. The other way is to just feel lifted up and carried wherever you go. And if we feel her presence, it becomes a great reality. We don't have to struggle. Wherever we go, there's a guidance and a presence which is as if carrying us. So, this is what's remarkable, that when one is perfectly surrendered to the divine, one is perfectly free. And this is the absolute condition for freedom, to belong to the divine alone. You're free from the whole world because you belong only to Him. And this surrender is the supreme liberation. You are also free from your little personal ego, and of all things, this is the most difficult. And the happiest too. What's the happiest? To be free of your ego. The only thing that can give you a constant peace, an uninterrupted joy, and the feeling of an infinite freedom from all that afflicts you, dwarfs you, diminishes, impoverishes you, and from all that can create the least anxiety in you, the least fear. You are no longer afraid of anything. You no longer fear anything. You are the supreme master of your destiny, because it is the divine who wills in you and guides everything. And that divine is you in your deepest self. So you are the master of your destiny. This is a beautiful story. I could say it, but it's written so beautifully that I'm going to read it out. It's called Commissioned by Ramji. It's about Swami Vivekananda. The immutable calm of the sannyasi irritated the fellow passenger, a petty trader. He looked upon the hordes of sadhus as parasites and saw an opportunity to give his peace of mind to this young man in ochre, who he decided ought to earn an honest living instead of hoodwinking people. This incident in the life of Swami Vivekananda had taken place in the summer of 1890, when he was a young unknown sannyasi and not a world celebrity after the Parliament of Religions at Chicago. Swamiji had been on a visit to the ruler of a princely state and was now travelling in a third-class compartment. He had refused to take anything from the ruler, who would have been glad to offer much wealth to Swamiji, but the latter was adamant. Only a ticket, and that too by third class, was all that he needed. Why would Swami Vivekananda do this? There were devotees who would make him a wealthy man in the blink of an eye. But why did he choose third class and no money? It was his act of surrender to God. I'm not going to take from human beings. You take me, let me see how you look after me. I don't need to see, I know you look after me. In those, I told you last week to make an experiment with giving up something you need. Did anyone do it? Okay. Very good, very good. So we'll talk about it, we'll come to it. So sages are constantly experimenting with giving up their needs just to see in their own experience that they don't need anything. Because actually we are a consciousness which is Nitya Tript and Nitya Poon. All our needs are conditioned. So that's what we see in the life of any sage. In those days, in the hot summer months, because of a great shortage of water in Rajasthan, drinking water sold for 1 paisa a glass on wayside stations. Swami Vivekananda, not having a single paisa with him, could not buy water. The trader had noted this. He asked Swamiji, how was it that he didn't even have a few coins with him to buy water or food? Swamiji replied that God carried his purse and always looked after his needs. He didn't burden himself with money or other possessions. This was a good point to nettle the sannyasi, thought the trader. He had with him a surai, an earthen pot filled with water, and a basket full of food. From time to time he drank some cool water and took a sweet or a fruit. And all the time he kept taunting Swamiji with the negligence of his God, who didn't care how much his disciples suffered. Swamiji refused to get annoyed or to retort. He remained calm. This infuriated the passenger even more. At about lunchtime, they reached a small junction station of Uttar Pradesh, where they had to change trains. The other train was to come after an hour or so. In those days, some of the out-of-the-way small stations didn't even have a shed for passengers to relax under. This station had a single tree to provide shade to the third-class passengers. The trader at once took out a dari, a thick cotton spread, unrolled it under the most shady part of the tree, brought out food, cool water, and partook a hearty meal, all the while taunting Swamiji and his guard about the inability of God to provide even a drop of water to his hungry and thirsty disciple. Swamiji kept smiling as he sat on the ground. Suddenly they saw a man hurrying towards them. He had a clean mat and a covered basket in one hand and a large tumbler in another. He spread the mat at a clean place, took out a leaf and arranged on it cooked vegetables, puris, 2 or 3 types of sweets, and then came with a tumbler towards Swami Vivekanand with folded hands and said, "Come, Swamiji, be pleased to take some food." The trader was watching with intense curiosity. Swamiji answered the stranger, "Brother, surely you're mistaken. You don't even know me. I'm here for the first time. How could you have brought food for me? It must be meant for someone else." The man answered humbly, "Swamiji, this is for you. I'm a food vendor. In the morning I prepared some vegetables and puris and some sweets and sold them. At noon, having finished my business as usual, I lay down to sleep. While I was asleep, I saw Ramji standing by my side. With the touch of his foot, he woke me up. I thought it was a dream, so I changed sides and went back to sleep. This time Ramji prodded me with his foot and told me, "Wake up. One of my devotees, a sannyasi, is sitting on the station platform. He is hungry and thirsty. Carry food and water for him." I woke up and prepared these fresh puris and came running. "Here is some cool water. Please wash your hands and feet. Due to you, I had the darshan and touch of Ramji." The man prostrated himself before Swamiji. Tears of love flowed from Swamiji's eyes as the trader fell at his feet and begged forgiveness. So if you live with this surrender, it is not possible that God won't look after you, because God is Sarveshwar, right? The Lord of everything. He has an ultimate control over all minds. This reminds me of a story. I was once at Golconda in Pondicherry, and a friend of mine, a very, very devoted friend, was also in Golconda. So he has to be in Pondicherry every year for his birthday. And he hadn't quite recovered from dengue, but just by an act of will, he landed up in Golconda. And he reached evening. I told him, "Shall I get you some dinner?" Because I knew he found it difficult to even stand. We know what dengue pain is like. And he said, no, I've had my dry fruit. So I believed him. So I went to the Samadhi at night. On the way, I get this very strong thought, I'm not revealing his name, but A is very hungry. Very powerful thought comes in my mind. So I said, no, this is my imagination. But it was persistent. A is very hungry. A is very hungry. And by then it was about 8:45, because I go to the Samadhi late at night. So everything around the Samadhi was shut. That A to B was slightly open. They were packing up. All they had was orange juice. So I got as much orange juice as I can. I went back to Golconda and I gave it to him. And his eyes stared and he looked at mother and he said, actually, I was very hungry. I was feeling dizzy. But as a rule, when I come to Pandi, I don't ask any human being for anything. So that's the kind of control she had. She controls everyone's mind and provides you with what you need. Vichal. So now words from Savitri. O mortal, bear this great world's law of pain. In thy hard passage through a suffering world, lean for thy soul's support on heaven's strength. Turn towards high truth, aspire to love and peace. A little bliss is lent thee from above, a touch divine upon thy human days. Make of thy daily way a pilgrimage, for through small joys and griefs thou movest towards God. Haste not towards Godhead on a dangerous road. Open not thy doorways to a nameless power. Climb not to Godhead by the Titan's road. So the Titan's road is the road of the ego, where I want things my way. I don't have it in me to surrender to God's will. So Sri Aurobindo is saying, haste not towards Godhead on a dangerous road. Open not thy doorways to a nameless power. Climb not to Godhead by the Titan's road. Against the law he pits his single will. Who is he? The Titan, the ego. Against God's law he pits his single will. Across its way he throws his pride of might. Heavenward he clambers on a stair of storms. He tries to climb to heaven on a stair of storms, because the ego is constantly creating conflict and storms everywhere, and still it's trying to climb. Heavenward he clambers on a stair of storms, aspiring to live near the deathless sun. He strives with a giant's strength to wrest by force from life and nature the immortal's right. So the ego is always trying to snatch things from life. As I said, it's the ego which can't do a single thing without wanting a kickback, without wanting something back in return, instead of just going with the flow. He takes by storm the world and fate in heaven. He comes not to the high world maker's seat. He waits not for the outstretched hand of God to raise him out of his mortality. So many of us, our ego make us feel that I only must do. If something good happened, I made the effort. But it's good to soften and remember I made the effort, but if the outcome came, it couldn't come without grace. So gratitude is so much richer an emotion to feel than arrogance. Arrogance is, that feeling of I did good is necessary to a point till you get individualized. But you have to go beyond that, and even in the process of individualization, you don't have to sacrifice one for the other. You can have self-worth that, yeah, I'm good, I did it. But also recognize that I did it because grace made it happen. It can be both. It doesn't have to be one for the other. But anytime you're feeling very good about, wow, I did it, always temper it with gratitude, because the most capable people don't achieve anything if grace doesn't help them. We know that. Okay, this is a personal sharing. I wrote this specially for the Savitri class because I wanted to articulate it properly. I called it my tea experiment. Okay. So one thing I thought I truly enjoyed was my cup of tea. However, I discovered that it was not about enjoyment. The cup of tea had become a need. That was when it became a problem because I felt uneasy when it wasn't available. A few days ago, I decided to quit it. As expected, I got a terrible headache and it made me wonder why I was daily putting a substance into my body whose lack could create an effect of this magnitude. Thereafter, whenever the urge for tea would arise, I would breathe, relax, stay present to the urge till it passed. So as a rule, whenever I was needy of the tea, I would never reach out for it. But when I was sure that I could do without it, but was choosing to enjoy it nonetheless, I would have half a cup. This opened up a Pandora's box. I saw how many needs were controlling my life. Need for a fixed routine, need for A person's attention or B person's goodwill. I did the same whenever any of these needs arose. I breathed, softened, and let it pass through, reminding my consciousness that I'm whole and complete without the object of need. I can enjoy the object if life chooses to bring it to me without needing it. The promise of the Vedic rishis, where they say each of us is Nitya Purna, eternally complete, trenchantly played in my mind. So this is very interesting. It started with a cup of tea, but I noticed it wasn't a cup of tea. It was a way of being in my consciousness, a way of being which says that to be complete, I had to have the cup of tea. Not articulated like this, but a feeling. And when I didn't have that cup of tea and I just softened and relaxed and watched that urge to have tea and let it pass, it opened up a whole Pandora's box. I started noticing that whenever a need for somebody would arise, a need to get this, need to have a routine, need to have a conversation, need to have a person's attention, whatever, it was the same process. It was an illusion. I didn't really need it to be happy. It was a past conditioning. So I would do the same. I would just breathe out, relax and soften and let the need pass. And it was amazing what a change it produced in one particular relationship I was working on. Because you realize how much even unspoken needs in your head, how much pressure it puts on a person. You may feel it's normal. If I'm a friend, it's normal to expect this, it's normal to do all that. But forget all that. The point is, my experiment was to prove to myself that I could do without any object of need. So even if some days it went to the extent I have to do my yoga every morning, but one day I went without it just to see, and I was perfectly fine. So everything is good to do, but if it becomes a need, that's your prison. And you're building your own prison with your sense of need. Also, so many of us stay trapped in relationships that are non-progressive and keep orbiting the same circles of conflict and resentment. We are afraid to let go because we are convinced we need the person, even if we suffer immensely through our interactions with the person. Have you noticed it's the same circle? Different situations, but A person is saying the same thing, B person is responding the same thing. Every few days the same cycle will repeat. We are afraid to let go because we are convinced we need the person, even if we suffer immensely through our interactions with the person. Because we feel we can't do without the person. Or I'm not saying cut your relationship, but sometimes you need space. But if you feel you don't talk to the person and make amends, you lose the person, and sometimes that talking creates more of a mess. So we are afraid to let go because we are convinced we need the person, even if we suffer immensely through our interactions with the person. Whenever the need arises, instead of reaching out to the person, if we could stay with the fear of losing this person, Like the fear of what will happen if I don't have that cup of tea? Nothing will happen. So stay with the fear of losing this person, relax, breathe and let it pass. Then to that extent to which we release need, we can stop being the needy victim and live life in freedom on our own terms. So very often I've seen youngsters, they have a fight with their partner and sometimes they just need space to settle down. But they are so afraid of losing the relationship that they'll keep messaging, keep retaliating, keep explaining, keep defending, keep offending, when you know that that is pointless. So at that time you face your fear that if I don't message, what is going to happen? At most, I'll lose the relationship. But it's better to lose any number of relationships than to lose your friend, lose yourself. So actually it's wonderful to tell yourself that I can lose everything, but I don't want to lose myself, and I don't want to lose my peace of mind, and I don't want to lose my relationship with mother. The same could apply for a professional or academic need to succeed. While we make all the efforts to succeed, we realize that each of us is complete and whole, independent of success or failure. Can we believe this, that we are complete and whole, independent of success or failure? We can't, unless we've connected to Mother's presence within us, which makes us feel that wholeness. If you've ever felt her presence, and I'm sure all of you have, at that moment, whatever somebody says, whether you succeed, whether you fail, you know that that success can't add to what you are. You know that failure can't subtract from what you are. You are already complete and whole. Then we can enjoy making the effort without the need for a preferred outcome. The problem is, whether in relationships or professionally, we come from a place of lack and we have the illusion that if our needs are fulfilled, we will be completed. That is like trying to quench our thirst with salt water. It is perhaps wiser to confront the root, which is our neediness. See through it, see through the fact that that neediness is an illusion, and come back to the wholeness we eternally are. Make sense? Any questions?
But that wholeness is at present a belief, right? We haven't experienced it.
You haven't experienced it, but the Gita also says, Yoya Shraddha Sa Eva Sa. Whatever is your belief becomes your truth. So you can start by keep reminding yourself, and along with it keep trying to feel Mother's presence, because when you feel that presence, you don't need a reminder. That reminder is that presence is a constant reminder that you're already whole. But in the absence of that, keep remembering. Now
One more thing you said about doing something good. Now when we are practicing, trying to practice
louder.
If we are practicing that, oh Lord, I am the instrument, you fulfill your will through me. It's a practice. If we have not reached there, but so you can deal with what comes to you at that time from somebody else. Somebody is rude to you. You can deal
No,
with that.
no,
Okay.
Anjan, don't let it be just a meaningless saying. When you say, let your will be done, the more important thing is to reiterate in yourself, I want nothing for myself. And to notice that very subtle ambition, craving that comes up in the doing, to let it come up, watch it and offer it to God.
Yeah, but my question was, what about the wrong that we do? If we are practicing
So
that,
wait,
if
we'll
I
come to
do-
that. We'll come to that.
See, the last lines you read says that, na? He strives with a giant strength to wrest by force from life and nature the immortals, right?
Yes, yes. The Buddha taught, this is Karen Miller's words, the Buddha taught what he called the Four Noble Truths. He taught truth as it is, complete and universal. He called it noble because there's nothing truer than what is. You don't have to believe this is true because you experience it every time things don't go your way. So, the Four Noble Truths is life is suffering. Karen Miller changes to things change. You suffer because things change. Second noble truth is the origin of suffering is attachment. Karen Miller changes it to it hurts when things change. So the first noble truth, dukkha, is things change. I don't like them to change, so I'm suffering. Origin of suffering is attachment. It hurts when things change. The stopping of suffering is attainable. How do you attain stopping suffering? Accept that things change. Don't be attached to a need. Because that cup of tea you got today, how do you know you'll get it tomorrow? Tomorrow, if you don't get it, you'll suffer. So accept that things change. I'm given this thing to enjoy today. Tomorrow I may not have it. Accept it. There is a way out of suffering by changing yourself. If you change yourself, that's the Eightfold Path of the Buddha. I'm not going into that. But so beautifully she said the Four Noble Truths in her language is 1. Things change. 2. It hurts when things change. 3. The way out of suffering is accept that things change. And there is a way out of suffering by changing yourself. We won't go the Buddhist way. Our way is to move from ego to surrender. By rigidity, giving up the thought that I want this and I'll be happy only if this. That is the first step, no? What was the first step? That let your will be done, I want nothing. But I can say this, but I don't really mean it, because deep down I'm convinced that only if what I want is fulfilled, I'll be happy. So to give that away. When we try to imagine what it means to overcome our attachments, we picture cruel and unfeeling indifference. But that is never the outcome of overcoming attachments. That is never the outcome of accepting what happens. That is never the outcome of allowing people and things to be as they are. The outcome of attachment, of non-attachment, is love. We often feel, that was a question last class, that if I'm not attached, won't I become indifferent? But it's a fact that the outcome of non-attachment is love. Everything falls apart, no matter how hard you've tried. All that forethought, planning and prevention. This life of ours is strewn with faded blooms, blooms that are so beautiful but they'll fade. You didn't sign up for the hard part, but this is the way it is. How will you love what you don't even like? There is only one way, selflessly. So you could have people in your life who you don't like, but the spiritual path invites you to love everyone. How will you love what you do? Can you love but still dislike a person? Does it make sense to you?
Yeah.
How?
But you don't dislike it. So it's at different planes. I do not have to say.
Yes. See, you're in love with the presence, with yourself, with your life. As I said, you're not only so invested in the person's behavior. So, and you can't not be invested in the person's behavior unless you're invested in the spiritual reality inside you. When you're really invested in that, you may not like the person's behavior, but it won't reach you. You'll just smile and say, okay, let her be. Anyway, my happiness or unhappiness doesn't depend on her. Yes?
It's like that feeling that there's a garbage dump, you know, even there's divine in the garbage dump. You're not going to go and sit beside it.
Yes.
You do not like the garbage dump. No one will say I like garbage. But in itself, you can at least know that there's divinity even in that.
There's
Like
divinity in that, and it has a context in the
Yes.
whole. If there was no garbage dump, your whole city would be full of litter. The garbage dump is required for your city to be clean.
So it's not that you may like it, but you can know that there's a deeper purpose behind it.
Yeah, and in that universal realm of everything is God. So, when you act with compassion, all you're doing is undoing ignorance, ignorance of needing, attachment, suffering, fear, anger, exploitation, alienation, injury, blame, you name it. Simply by undoing the stingy hold you keep on yourself, thinking poor me impoverishes your entire world. When my daughter was about, this is Karen Miller talking, when my daughter was about 6 years old, someone asked her what it was like to have a mom who's a Zen priest. She screams a lot, she said. It wasn't the answer they were expecting. There were polite chuckles all around. I can comfort myself with the fact that children only remember what their parents scream, not when their parents don't. Silence, after all, is a non-event. No matter what I was hollering about, I wish I'd had the presence of mind to let it go. I wish I'd dropped my rage, frustration, or despair, whatever illusory part of me I was cherishing at that time. This was another thing I noticed. With my tea experiment, it was really a Pandora's box. So for instance, if one of my staff did something which I felt was not right or too demanding, normally a reaction would come up where I'd need to tell them you're wrong. But that need came up and I just softened, relaxed and let it go. And I said, okay, I wanted this particular staff to do something for me, and he said, no, I'm not doing it for XYZ reasons. So first I would say, how can you say that? I needed blah. I just said, okay, as you wish. And the moment I dropped it, he said, no, ma'am, if you need it, I'll do it. And I said, no, please don't do it. I'm not angry at you. I'm not sarcastically telling you don't do it. So he said, no, even I'm not angry at you. I'm not saying I'll do it out of anger. So I just realized we have so many opportunities to drop unnecessary battles. But we love battles because it gives us a chance to affirm ourselves. It's an ego trip.
But somewhere the whole philosophy of Krishna and Arjuna is about the fight.
Yeah, but you fight when you don't have a mind to fight. So Krishna and Arjun's story is true. But when was Arjun really ready to fight and kill? When he wasn't doing it to avenge Draupadi, when he wasn't doing it for anything but the fact that it's Krishna's will. So you have to reach that space. And then you don't really have, like there's that Zen story of that Zen fighter who could have killed his enemy because he was at such an advantage and the enemy spat in his face. You know that story. And he just left and went away. And later on when the enemy asked him that you could have killed me, why did you spare me? So he said, because you spat at me, I felt angry. And my training says never to raise the sword when I'm angry. I have to fight out of a completely clear space if I need to fight. But to fight out of anger and aggression, it's only going to create destruction for you and people around. You want to say something?
No, I'm just thinking that even when you read certain parts of the Bhagavad Gita, it's almost like Krishna is convincing Arjun throughout through different aspects. First, he was reminding him his duties, he said no for that, and he reminded him of so many different things. Only when he saw the Virat Swarup and realized, oh yes, it's happening in Krishna by his will, for his will.
Yes.
So there is no me.
Yes.
That's when he realized there is no me. When he let go of that ego, only he took the action.
Right. And when Draupadi told him, wow, you did this for me, he said, no, Draupadi, don't lie to yourself. I didn't do it for you. I did it only for one reason, it was Krishna's will. So that's the real battle. So this story about her being a Zen master also, she says she regrets all those times when she screamed and shouted because she was holding on to an illusion of herself. Why not just let it go? One time after a mountain retreat, Mezumi asked me to come to his home nearby and meet his family. At the time, there was only one phone on the property of the Zen center. This was before cell phones could add another layer of egocentric disengagement to modern life. A payphone strung up outside the bathhouse, and when it rang, someone ran up to the dorm to fetch me. I was packing to leave. Roshi, that's a term for the master. Roshi is calling for you, the messenger said, out of breath. I was feeling pretty special on the way downhill to take the call. But when I heard his invitation, I had to say no. It was impossible. What with the drive to LA and the pay plane to catch, perhaps he didn't understand how impractical it was for me. Maybe he didn't grasp how far I had to travel or what I had to do. I thought he was a little naive to the ways of the world I lived in. No, I couldn't come, but maybe some other time. We all know how that kind of thinking turns out. In between the self, and then later, of course, Mezumi left his body prematurely. In between the self-important student who has no time and the mom who terrifies her kid, I've gotten a good look at what I hold dearest, myself. It's what I must let go of completely before it's time to go. Then this life will have flowered into something beautiful without my getting in the way. One more thing, open quotes, Mom, you don't have to keep telling me because I know I love you. So she's coming in a full circle. She's so beautifully describing the perfection in the imperfection. Her daughter says, I scream, she screams a lot. But then when she keeps telling her daughter, I love you, the daughter says that, Mom, you don't have to keep telling me. I know you love me. And it's a beautiful thing she's driving home is, that self-importance that comes us, that stops us from extending ourselves, that stops us from running that extra mile for a person, from stretching our boundaries, because we have to preserve ourselves. So sometimes just letting go of that. For example, this thing with my staff, if he refused to do it, it would cause me inconvenience. I'd have to stretch that extra mile to do it myself. So that me which needed to be defended came up as anger. But it was so beautiful to just let it go and say it's okay. And in little things, if you drop that me which you're constantly trying to defend, because you're already being defended by mother, you're already being protected. If this staff wouldn't do it, surely the universe would arrange things so that it would get done anyway. It's not something to lose your mind, peace of mind over and get into a battle. So this was step one. This whole thing was step one of 3 steps in All is Sky and God. The first step is letting go of your neediness, your ego, your preferences, and just offering yourself to the divine that let your will be done through me. I want nothing. I'm keeping on repeating, reiterate that I want nothing. Catch the want when it comes up, bring it to consciousness and let it go. Step 2, the next process is to stand aside and watch the working of the divine power in yourself. This working is often attended with disturbance and trouble in the system. Therefore, faith is necessary, though perfect faith is not always possible at once. For whatever impurity is in you, harbored openly or secretly lurking, is likely to rise at first and be repeated so long as it is not exhaustively swept out. And doubt in this age is almost a universal impurity. So if you have a beaker of water with sand at the bottom, if you don't stir it, you'll see clear water, you'll feel you're very good. But if you put a stirrer, the dirt will come up. Coming to Mother, she stirs up everything in you which needs to be cleaned. So not an exaggeration to say I've had my best and worst times in Pondi. Best times when you feel like light, and worst times when things come out in you which you feel, gosh, is this in me? What am I feeling? Why is it coming out? Because that's the nature of her force. She brings out what needs to be transformed. Not just in Pondi. Anytime you have a deep meditation, very often the next day you'll feel like, what is this? Where has that gone? And what is this person that is living in my skin? Because that's the nature of her yoga. She brings out all things that need to be cleansed. So that's the time when doubt comes. You feel, is Mother with me? Has she left me? Why am I like this? But even when doubt assails, stand by and wait for it to pass, availing yourself, if possible, of the satsang of those who are already advanced on the path. But when that is absent, still holding fast to the principle of the yoga, self-surrender. When distressed within or assailed from without, remember the words of the Gita. By giving thyself up in heart and mind to me, thou shalt cross over all difficulties and perils by my grace. And again from the Gita, Sarva Dharman Parityajya, that one, abandon all dharmas, all law, rule, means, and code of every kind, whether formed by previous habit and belief or imposed from outside, and take refuge in me alone. I will deliver thee from all sin and evil, do not grieve. Anjan, I hope this answers your question. Even if something goes wrong, see, Mother's yoga is very, very beautiful. Sri Aurobindo has said something which I've never heard anyone else say in my limited reading. Maybe they have, but I haven't read. He said that if you have a particular darkness in your nature, be sure you have an equal amount of light in your nature. So never feel despondent because of the darkness. When you change, you'll go over equally to the opposite side as like Angulimal. After killing hundreds of people, when he changed, he was among the 5 monks who the Buddha trained, who got enlightened out of the thousands. You wouldn't think, so never look, just yesterday a parent wrote to me cribbing about her children and said, my kids are beyond repair. And I wrote to her really feeling it, but I couldn't explain it to her that nobody is ever beyond repair. How damaged your kids are, when the time comes, probably they'll swing to that extreme of light. But now can't explain this to everyone. Maybe I will when I meet her, but that's besides the point. So never despair with the darknesses of your nature. Whatever darkness you have an equal opposite light you can grow into when the flip happens. So when the darkness comes up also, don't feel guilty. You know, this is a moral conditioning in us that if I'm a good person, I should feel very guilty. But please remember, Mother has said, of all emotions, the one most corrosive to your growth is guilt. Whatever you've done, learn from it and move ahead. Don't just keep whipping up guilt. It serves no purpose. So, you have not to be troubled or struggle yourself as if the responsibility were yours or the result depended on your effort. A mightier than you is busy with the matter. So beautiful. You don't have to struggle with your weaknesses. A mightier than you is busy with the matter. Neither disease nor calamity nor the rising of sin and impurity in you should cause any harm. Hold fast only to Him. I will deliver thee from all sin and evil. But release does not come by a sudden miracle. It comes by a process of purification. And these things are a part of the process. They are like the dust that rises in clouds when a room long uncleaned is at last swept out. Though the dust seem to choke you, yet persevere. Ma shucha, do not grieve. In order to stand aside, you must know yourself as the Purusha who merely watches. This is still step 2. Step 1 was, I want nothing, let your will be done. Step 2, stand aside and watch God's working in you without interfering. So, know yourself as the Purusha who merely watches, consents to God's work, holds up the Aadhar and enjoys the fruits that God gives. The work itself is done by God as Shakti, by Kali, and is offered up by her as a yajna to Sri Krishna. You are the yajnaman who sees the sacrifice being done, whose presence is necessary to every movement of the sacrifice, and who tastes its results. This separation of yourself, this renunciation of the kartavya abhiman, the idea of yourself as the doer, is easier if you know what the Aadhar is. Above the buddhi, which is the highest functioning of the mind, is the higher buddhi of Vigyan, the seat of the Satya Dharma, truth of knowledge, truth of bhava, truth of action. And above this ideal faculty is the Ananda, cosmic bliss, in which the divine part of you dwells. It is of this Vijnan and this Ananda that the Christ spoke as the kingdom of God that is within you. We at present are Jagrit, awake in the lower movements, but Susupta, fast asleep in Vijnan and Ananda. Very beautiful. How beautifully he said, see, we are the Panch Koshas, no? The 5 Koshas. Anandmay Kosha, the sheath of Anand. Vigyanmay Kosha, the sheath of wisdom. And what we know, the Manomay Kosha, mind, Pranamay Kosha, vital, and Annamay Kosha, physical. But he says we are awake, Jagrit, in Manomay, Pranamay and Annamay, that is mental, vital, physical. But we are asleep in our Anandmay and Vigyanmay, and we have to awake in that. When we awaken that, the wisdom tells us that all this that is happening, the thoughts, emotions, etc., it's a very superficial part of me. The real me is untouched by that. So I was reading Mother's words so beautifully. Maybe next week I'll get her exact word. She says from the time she was little, she always felt in everything a flame of white light. And she says no matter what happened, that white light was so prominent that I never felt sullied or dirtied by anything. So from a young age, she never articulate the words Vigyanmay Kosha, Anandmay Kosha. We know that white is the mother's light, but she wasn't so in touch with herself that she felt whatever life did, that whiteness of that flame was never sullied, it was never dirtied. So that whiteness is the Purusha within us, which is always, as Sri Aurobindo writes in Savitri, the immortal, unwounded self. It's never wounded. So, for when this happens, we gain the condition of being which is called in the Gita dwelling in God, of which Sri Krishna speaks when he say, Mayi nivasyasyeva, verily thou shalt dwell in me. Once it is gained, we are free and blessed and have everything towards which we strive. So the second aspect is to stand back as the Purusha and observe the workings of God in us without being disturbed. Step 3. So what was the first step? First step was, let your will be done, I want nothing. Second step was standing back and watching God's working in us. The third step is to perceive all things as God, a very, very fundamental and important step. It is not only in things animate, but in things inanimate also, that we must see Narayan, experience Shiva, throw our arms around Shakti. When our eyes that are now blinded by the idea of matter open to the supreme light, we shall find that nothing is inanimate, but all contains expressed or unexpressed, involved or evolved, secret or manifest, or in the course of manifestation, not only that state of involved consciousness which we call annam or matter, but also life, mind, knowledge, bliss, divine force and being. Prana, Manas, Vijnan, Ananda, Chit, Sat. Flowers, fruits, earth, trees, metals, all things have a joy in them of which you will become aware. Because in all Sri Krishna dwells, having entered into them, not materially or physically, because there is no such thing, space and time being only conventions and arrangements of perception, the perspective in God's creative art, but by Chit, the divine awareness in His transcendent being. All this world and every object in this world of Prakriti has been created for the habitation of the Lord. Nor is it enough to see Him in all things and beings as Sarva Bhuteshu. You must see Him in all events. So everything that happens in life, it's a movement in the body of God. In your thoughts, feelings, in yourself and others throughout the world. For this realization, two things are necessary. First, that you should give up to Him the fruit of your actions. Secondly, that you should give up to Him the actions themselves. Giving up the fruit of actions does not mean that you must have vairagya for the fruits, turn away from them, or refuse to act without a given end. It means that you must act not because you want this or that to happen or think it necessary that this or that should happen and your action needed to bring it about, but because it's kartavyam karma, demanded by the master of your being, and must be done with whatever result God is to give you. You must put aside what you want and wish to know what God wants. Let your will be done. I don't want anything. Distrust what your heart, your passions, or your habitual opinions prefer to hold as right and necessary, and passing beyond them, like Arjun in the Gita, seek only to know what God has set down as right and necessary. Be strong in the faith that whatever is right and necessary will inevitably happen as a result of your due fulfillment of the kartavyam karma, even if it's not the result that you preferred or expected. The power that governs the world is at least as wise as you, and is not absolutely necessary that you should be consulted or indulged in its management. God is seeing to it.
But to be touched with the kartavyam, one would have to be almost on the same understanding as God's will.
Yes, so it's work in progress. Just follow these 3 steps. You won't be there absolutely perfectly, but even 5%, it grows to 10%, it grows to 20%.
Whatever is your perception of what God's will is. Because
God, yes, your perception, but before doing or speaking, just remind yourself or address Mother, I want your will to be done. I don't know what your will is, but my aspiration is that your will is done. And whatever I want or whatever preferences I have, I'm surrendering to you, and start from there. The best foundation for surrender of action is the realization that Prakriti is doing all actions at God's command, and God through our Svabhava determines the action. So we won't read this further, you can read it on your own. We come to the next page. According as I am appointed by thee, O Rishikesh, seated in my heart, so I act. This is Arjun telling Krishna in the Gita. According as I am appointed by thee, O Rishikesh, seated in my heart, so I act. When this has entered into your daily life, it will be easier to accomplish the second stage and live in the knowledge of the Gita. God stands in the heart of all beings, the Gita says, whirling round all, as on a wheel by the Maya of the three gunas. You will then be able to perceive the action of the three gunas in you and watch the machinery at its works, no longer saying I do, but that it is merely the gunas, sattva, rajas and tamas, that do the work. You must always remember that since you have put yourself in God's hands, He will work out all the impurities, and you have only to be careful, as you cannot be attached either to papa or punya, sin or virtue, for He has repeatedly given the Abhay Vachan, the assurance of safety, pratijani, He says in Gita. Na me bhakta pranishyati, he who is devoted to me cannot perish. The third stage comes out of the second, by full realization of God or of itself by the grace of God. Not only will the Purusha stand apart and be three gunatita, but the Prakriti using the gunas will be freed from their bondage. Sattva as we know it will disappear into Jyoti. Tamas will disappear into Shakti. Rajas will disappear into Shakti and Tamas becomes Shanti. So he says that's how your transformation of nature involves the transformation of gunas. Sattva becomes Jyoti or light. Rajas becomes Shakti or strength. And Tamas becomes Shanti or peace. Last paragraph. Your mind, heart, body will not be yours but God's. You yourself will be only a center of being, knowledge and bliss through which God works in that Aadhar. So earlier he says that to stand apart and watch the working of Prakriti, you need to know who the Aadhar is. Right now you think your Aadhar is this ego self. But you'll recognize that I as an ego don't exist. I'm just this Aadhar of truth and knowledge and bliss in a transformed state through which God does His works. So that time I can never congratulate myself because I know that I'm not doing. Your actions will disappear without leaving in you mark or trace. As a wave disappears from the surface of the sea, you won't keep thinking, wow, I did it. Oh God, I didn't do it. So your actions will disappear without leaving in you a mark or trace. As wave disappears from the surface of the sea, or water falls from the lotus leaf. Your mind, heart, body will not be yours but God's. You yourself will be only a center of being, knowledge and bliss through which God works in the Aadhar. This is the condition in which one is utterly Tatchitta, given up in all his conscious being to God. Tatchitta, the consciousness of his consciousness, of that consciousness, in which there is utter fulfillment of the description. So we stop here. So just a question, how many of you really think about our class, or is it just a feel good and you forget all about it during the week? You try and remember. You try, because that's when it's really useful. So let's concretize how you will use these 3 steps by which all is sky and God in your daily life. It's a process, but each of us takes a baby step, and each baby step is useful in the larger context. So first step is that you remind yourself before talking, before doing anything, that you want God's will to be done. That's Atma Samarpan. Atma Samarpan is, or surrender, is not about quitting. It's about giving over charge to a higher intelligence. It's about flowing with that intelligence instead of pushing your egoistic will against its flow. So it's to remind yourself that God is much more ambitious for me than I am, because I love myself in a very egoistic, limited way, but God loves me in a way that I'm incapable of loving myself. So let that one who really loves me decide for me what's to be done. So my will always be second class compared to God's will. God's will always want better things for me than what my inferior buddhi will tell me. So it's intelligent. It's not just about emotion, but it's logical to invite God's will to flow through life rather than your will. So the first step is to always have this as my mantra: let your will be done. I want nothing. Let me give up all preference and let your will be done. Second thing, and it's important to give up preference. Little things like you're in traffic and you want the signal to change and you want to reach somewhere faster. Just get him a chair, please. He's coming. You want the traffic lights to change. Yeah, okay, Nash. You want the traffic light to change, etc., etc. Just relax and say, no, there's a purpose to this timing. God is timing my life. Even if I'm late, it's for a purpose. So just relax, sit back, give up the desire. Little things. Don't try with big things, but try in little things where you want to accept the flow of life as it is. Okay? So that's the first step. Let your will be done. I want nothing. And whenever I catch little wants in my head, I'm surrendering those wants. I'm not going to be controlled by them. The second step, Sri Aurobindo says, is to stand back and observe God's working. To not get so involved in the doing that you lose the witness poise. And even if things go wrong, to not lose your faith. Because as part of the working, things will come up which sometimes different parts of your nature will arise. You can sit. Different parts of your nature will arise when Mother's Shakti starts working in you as a cleansing process. So you mustn't get disheartened. Krishna has promised Arjuna in the Gita that I will deliver you from all your weaknesses and sin, and a devotee of mine never perishes. So stick it through. Don't be obsessed with the fact that this impurity must leave me. Be patient with yourself. Mother's been patient with us through lifetimes, hasn't she? Whatever we've done, she's never abandoned us. Why can't we be a little patient with our impurities? Not be controlled by them, but not hate ourselves or feel guilty for them. Just watch them come up, surrender them to God and let them pass. So that's the second step. The third step, and the key to his yoga, is to constantly remember that all is God. Now if you remember this, it takes away a lot of your suffering. Even in interactions, otherwise, for example, if A speaks to me rudely, I start getting caught up. A hates me, so she's talking to me rudely. I should do this, I should do that. But it becomes so simple if you remember Krishna's words that actually no creatures have their own will. All creatures are mounted on the machinery of Maya, Krishna tells Arjuna, and execute my will. Not even a leaf falls from the tree without my will. So it's mother's will that she spoke to me like that. Don't go into narratives of she's bad, she hates me, blah, blah, blah. Mother's will, she's spoken to me like that, must be for a reason. Mother will handle it. I don't have to jump to my defense. I don't have to do anything. I just step back and watch mother working. Like the example I gave you with my staff, right? That anger came up when he refused to do something I told him to do. And on the heels of that, I stepped back and watched. And when I watched, there was no anger. I just told him, okay, don't do it. And suddenly he said, no, 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 if you need it, I'll do it. So life corrects itself when you stop trying to correct it. Your action actually interferes very often. So that's the second step, step back and watch. And third step is everything is God. So it's God's will that he said this, God's will that I'm stuck, I'm going to be late. Instead of getting hecked up, just step back and watch. Somehow if you have that surrender, mother works out everything so that finally you always are where you need to be and it's at a good place. Okay, so these 3 steps. Do practice them. And if you have any little experiences like this experience with my staff, it's a small experience, but like that, bring it and I'd love to hear about it. Yeah? Chalo, let's end with 3 Oms.